It's Friday, which means it's time for another exciting episode of Ask Us Anything, in which Bahir and I take your questions and try to provide some satisfactory answers. We're going to kick things off with a question from @HFZHRS. What is the most underrated Top Gear Grand Tour challenge? I'm assuming this is off the back of our review of the Grand Tour, the final ever episode, One for the Road. I don't know if I have an answer to most underrated, but I do have my favorites, which may be underrated to some.
Okay.
I have to say most of my favorites come from Top Gear.
Yes.
So I don't know if you remember any of these, Bahir, but one of my favorites was the motorhome challenge, where they all have to build their own motorhomes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know that one.
I like that for the same reason I like a lot of my favorite Top Gear challenges, in that they kind of blend ridiculousness and comedy with a whole bunch of engineering. And so here the three men build out these motorhomes, but they're some of the most ridiculous ideas ever. And of course, it results in some real comedy as they have to test it and use it. I also liked the communist car challenge.
Yes.
Yeah, that was great. Also, because one of the cars on that was the Yugo, which was a notoriously shitty car that a guy called Bricklin had imported to the United States. Now, the Top Gear challenge aside, the Yugo and Bricklin are very interesting characters, because Bricklin met with Mahathir to sign an MOU to import protons to the US.
Okay.
And Mahathir was so impressed with him that he said yes. However, there was a whole problem with the deal because of the partnership with Mitsubishi and their own partnerships in the US that came into conflict with importing protons to the US. And so that never ever happened. But it was one of these great failures in the history of Proton that no one wants to talk about. Also, Bricklin is known for importing shitty cars into the American market.
That sounds like a movie waiting to be made.
Right?
Yeah.
But the communist car challenge was a lot of fun too.
For me, my favorites are the opposite of yours. In that the ones I remember the most are the ones where the guys get into some serious shit.
Right.
Like the Patagonia episode, where their cars were having trouble with the altitude. They had the same problem with Bolivia. I remember those bits where these three middle-aged men trying to ride these cars up the fucking Andes, and just like the infamous death road in Bolivia, and struggling. Not only their cars are struggling with the altitude, but they're struggling because they're not getting enough oxygen. Clarkson's getting a headache, so he's taking Viagra. It's just like all of that stuff. Like for me, the ones where they almost fail or put their body into the worst circumstances are my favorite.
I also like, there's another old episode on Top Gear where they tried to take a Robin Reliant and convert it into a space shuttle.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That was a cool one. There's the cheap Porsche challenge. They got lots of these cool ones that you don't think will work, and then often end up resulting in some very clever moments. I really like that about Top Gear a lot. And they used to do that a lot on the show.
It's the thinking out of the box, not just in terms of how to challenge the cars, but then also how to challenge the drivers, and also how to challenge the location that they're in. You know, when they took Toyota Hiluxes to the magnetic North Pole, I think it was, or the South Pole, it was just like, what are you fucking doing, guys? The ones I find most difficult to watch are the ones where Hammond gets into serious trouble when he crashes his car on that downhill race in Switzerland, I think it was. And that's the moment when you realize these guys are more than just doing a show. They're actually putting themselves at risk potentially.
I'm going to take this next question, Bahir, because it's for you. Kailash Laxman asks, Kyle Chandler as Green Lantern has me divided. On one hand, he's a great actor. On the other, why is DC struggling to cast a younger Hal Jordan? Even in the latest comics run, Hal is nowhere near his 50s. Hell, even when he was Parallax, he wasn't that old. Keep in mind that Kyle Chandler is nearing 60. What are your thoughts on the casting, and do you think they're paving the way for a younger Lantern, Rayner, perhaps? Now, before Bahir jumps into it, because I know
Okay.
Bahir has a lot of fucking thoughts on this,
Okay.
but before you jump into this, Bahir, I don't think DC is struggling to cast a younger Hal Jordan. I think it's part of James Gunn's vision for this new DCU that he's crafting. I think he has an idea of the kind of Green Lantern story he wants to tell, which is probably why they approached Josh Brolin in the first place. They're looking for actors in that age group. Now, take it away.
I agree with you. I think that for me is the easiest answer, right? And for me, this makes me feel happy. This isn't an introduction. They're not going to bring a young Hal and start him off when he gets his ring and blah, 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 blah. It's okay. No need. We don't need to. There are multiple versions of the comics that you can read.
Animated shows.
Animated shows, you don't need to introduce these characters to everybody every time. It's fine.
Also, there's a way to introduce the ring's capabilities and all of that stuff without doing exposition, origin story type stuff.
Yeah, all that is unnecessary. I think in 2024, with everything being so connected and being so readily available on the internet, I don't think you need any of that. Okay, so yes, my read on it is I agree. I think James Gunn is doing an older Green Lantern or an already established Green Lantern, because don't forget, Kyle Chandler aside, Nathan Fillion is Guy Gardner, also very old. So obviously that's the age range that they're looking at. From the casting news that I've read, they are also looking for a relatively older Jon Stewart, younger than Hal, but not like a 20-year-old. Even with Jon Stewart, they're looking at late 30s, early 40s, potentially even. So obviously they're moving those guys on. I hate it, but at the same time, I appreciate that there's thought in there. I don't like that I will not see Hal Jordan as the primary Green Lantern for essentially the long run of Gunn's DC universe. And that's fine. I hate it, but I am willing to accept it, because although Kyle Rayner is not my choice of Green Lantern, I'm open to Rayner because I'm hoping that then they can bring in Jessica Cruz, Simone Baz, which also makes it more interesting. The later Green Lanterns are also very interesting to me. They're not even getting their own comics right now. So I really, really love Kyle Chandler from Friday Night Lights. And I think as a Southern Green Lantern with that drawl that he's got, I'm excited for it. I'm more excited for Kyle Chandler to be Hal Jordan than I was when Nathan Fillion was announced as Guy Gardner.
That said, though, Nathan Fillion can play asshole well, which works with Guy Gardner.
Yes, he can. I agree with you. And I do not like Gardner. And I think maybe if anybody was going to make me like Guy Gardner, it might be Nathan Fillion.
Or maybe not like Guy Gardner, because I don't think Guy Gardner at any point is likable. I haven't read enough Green Lantern comics, but I really dislike Guy Gardner.
When he was first introduced in the late 90s or mid to early 90s, I think it was, he was okay because he was used as the counter to Jon Stewart's sort of slightly depressed PTSD Green Lantern former Marine guy. And here comes Guy Gardner, braggadocious with his stupid fucking orange bowl cut. And he was just a cocky bitch. And that was fine. So I think balanced out, I think that's okay. So yeah, that is my thesis for the Green Lantern series.
We have another Green Lantern question.
At Jonathan BWQ asks, now that we are getting another Green Lantern, was David Ramsey on Arrow a wasted opportunity? I say no. I thought David Ramsey was stupid as Green Lantern. I thought the introduction of David Ramsey as a Green Lantern was fucking idiotic.
I agree. I felt so forced.
Fucking idiotic.
And unnecessary.
David Ramsey as an actor.
And also, I liked his character on Arrow.
Why make him a Green Lantern? Why waste it? Why waste Diggle and just make him like, oh, at the end of the fucking series, he finds a ring and he's like, fuck off and die.
Also, he comes back later on Flash, completely forgotten that he has a ring.
So it's just like, no, I don't think it was a wasted opportunity. I think it was stupid that they even tried to introduce that idea.
It's the worst kind of fan service.
Well, not the worst. Zack Snyder's fan service tends to be the worst.
That's true.
But this is pretty fucking close.
X-Ray and Drops asks, I'm glad to see more films are being filmed in Malaysia. Do you think more studios will start filming longer, larger scale scenes here? Another question from Ant Rabbit Hop, also along the same lines. Mission Impossible 5 Rogue Nation also had a scene in Malaysia, but for only 3 seconds, maybe. Yes, when Ving Rhames was up a tower.
Yeah.
Will Thunderbolts be the same, or will we see a lot more action take place in our great nation? First of all, I'm not even sure it's Malaysia, right? I think it's Madripoor, most likely.
For me, there are two sort of sides of this argument. One is, would you want to see it being called Malaysia? Do you want them to be in Malaysia in the movie, or do you just want them to shoot it in Malaysia? Because I don't know if I would be disappointed that in Thunderbolts it's not Malaysia and it's actually Madripoor.
Same, I don't care. I don't give a shit. I just want them to shoot here and give us the money so it helps the economy.
You mentioned something that I didn't even think about, in that a lot of the times these guys, these productions, these massive multi-million dollar productions are looking for tax breaks.
That's all.
So there's a chance that they came here to shoot just so they can get a tax break. It doesn't even have to be an entire movie. Just how the first season of Mandalorian, I believe, had sequences edited here, or post-production was done in Malaysia. So they got tax breaks, which means ultimately it's just cheaper for them. So I don't know if it means anything to a Malaysian audience. I don't think it means anything to the Malaysian industry, to be honest.
Unless people start doing it on a much larger scale. Now, that requires actual work on the part of Finas, and it requires actual support from the government, kind of like what Australia did.
Yeah.
Back in the early 2000s, a lot of production started moving to Fox Studios in Australia. And yes, it upped their game tremendously. These days, if you watch the credits of movies, almost 60-70% of movies will have a New South Wales credit.
I dare say a little higher than that.
Yeah, it's a lot higher. Everything has
Yeah.
an Australia credit at the end there. And it really helped their local industry because everyone has to upskill, right?
Yeah.
Over here, I remember when they wanted to film Entrapment, there were so many stupid and silly regulations. So James Bond couldn't film here because they wanted to use it as a layer for the bad guy, and people were like, "Oh, can't use Petronas Twin Towers for that." I mean, it's all bullshit, right?
We've had this conversation before, because when Michael Mann came here to shoot Black Hat, and he shot a lot of that movie here, there was all this excitement about, oh, what this means for the Malaysian industry, blah, 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 blah. It means very little. If you do one-off massive scale productions every, I don't know, 10, 15 years, it means fuck all.
It means nothing.
The thing that people don't understand with regards to the whole thing about shooting at a place is that it isn't necessarily the production that provides benefits to the nation, right? It's the reason Atlanta loves when productions come down, or Vancouver in Canada when productions go up there, is that not only does it mean that they get some kind of sheen by being cool, the movie that was shot here, but also the American studios have to move a crew across, and the crew has to be put up in hotels, and they have to all be fed, and then they have to, on their days off, they might go shopping. So all of that ancillary business happens. Now, when a production sneaks in the way Thunderbolts did into Malaysia, and they snuck in, nobody knew anything about it, it was probably minimal crew. I don't even think the main director came down. It was probably a second unit director, maybe 3 crew camera guys, maybe a lighting, maybe a DP head, something like that. But, they put up Florence Pugh in a fancy 5-star hotel.
I think she was staying at the St. Regis.
It's one guy, maybe a 15, 20 man crew coming from the US, and everything else was local. And yeah, you think, okay, the local guys got to work, sure, but it was probably a 4-day shoot, 3-day shoot. So there was really no value to the wider economy.
So the whole Film in Malaysia initiative only works when they have a constant slew of productions coming in, forcing everyone to upskill. And so therefore the hope is that that skill then trickles down into local productions and ups the game of local productions. And in theory, on paper, all of that sounds really, really good. But to make that happen, the government actually needs to create a fertile environment in which these foreign productions want to come here and spend lots of money.
But also, the international productions are looking at the abilities of our local crews, because they're not going to bring their entire 150-man crew down, right? They might bring down department heads, but they're hoping that there's a local camera guy that's good, that there's a local light guys that are good. And I mean, shit, sorry, Black Hat was one, but what about Marco Polo, which was shot here multiple seasons? Nothing happened off of that, right? There was no fanfare about, oh, the third assistant director making his own film now because he was mentored on that show. No, nothing happened to those guys. So you're right. It needs to be regular. It needs to be multiple productions a year. The light guys need to be working with the Hollywood light guys. The camera grips need to be working with the Hollywood camera grips. And maybe they learn something there and then go on to do other things locally. But other than that, it's just a tax break for the American productions. It means very little locally. At Ide Fowles asks, with Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine being a massive success, do you think this is a sign that Disney is reclaiming their good name back after most of their 2023 projects flopped?
To be fair, Disney's had a very, very good year. Inside Out 2, Deadpool, sure. But also, First Omen did very well. Alien Romulus did very well. Planet of the Apes did very well, both critically and at the box office. So
Yeah.
they've had a very, very good year. I mean, Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine have both single-handedly resurrected the US box office because they're two of the biggest hits this year. I don't know if it's a question of reclaiming your good name back because all of this is cyclical. And every studio, Sony, Disney, Warner, all of them have good years and bad years just because of the lineup that they have for that particular year.
Yeah.
And we speak to a lot of these individuals at the studio level, and a lot of them will often talk about, oh, next year we don't have any big hits. We don't have any tentpoles coming out next year. It's going to be 2026. Like, there's no Fast movie coming out next year. There's no big Transformers movie coming out next year. So there are none of these big tentpoles. So what does that mean for Universal, right? Warner, on the face of it, looks like they just have Superman as their biggest release next year. So what does it mean for them? And then, of course, there's the idea that these movies that will get released have to be good. That is the bigger question, right? What is going to inspire audiences to pay money, to buy tickets, to come and see these movies in cinemas? I think with Disney, one interesting thing that they did do is they brought Pixar back into cinemas. I think that was a big step. The previous CEO, massive fuck up. He had this need to push Disney Plus, right? They had just launched a streaming service. And their idea was, we need to put some high quality content on the streaming service. It helped that there was a pandemic, so it's an excuse to pull these things out of cinemas. But what that meant was that audiences, families in particular, thought, oh, well, I can just wait until it gets released on Disney Plus, because then I don't have to buy tickets for my whole freaking family. I pay a monthly subscription. I already have it at home. And I think that mentality was very hard to break. And so by delaying the Disney Plus release, by bringing Pixar back into the cinemas and actually having a really solid fucking product,
Yeah.
I think all of those factors played into getting bums on seats and hitting that $1 billion mark.
And for me, I think the other statement here is that when there's a reference towards Disney, the question is, what are you talking about here, right? Because Inside Out 2 was Pixar, Deadpool and Wolverine was Marvel, Alien Romulus was Fox, I believe.
20th century, yeah.
20th century, yeah. So it's easy to blame one big, massive brand for these fuck ups. But I think it's unfair to the brand because Disney doesn't manage the day-to-day productions of a Pixar production. Disney conglomerate's decision to push a lot of the Pixar stuff onto Disney Plus really held them back for a couple of years. And I think they're only now just recovering. So there is an outsized expectation because of the successes of the Marvel films that Disney will always make good things. I disagree. They've made bad things since forever.
We remember the good things and we like rewatching the good things over and over again. But Disney, like Sony, like Fox, like Warner, have had a long history of making crap.
I don't know if they're reclaiming their good name, but I think they're bringing themselves, or at least their IPs, back to the forefront with these 2 or 3 big things that have hit.
Whatever strategy they're employing at the moment, whatever strategy Iger has put in place seems to be working for 2024. So I think 2024 has been a very good year for them. There's still Moana 2 and Mufasa to release.
I'm looking forward to Moana.
I love Moana so
I
much.
love Moana so much.
I really hope they have some good songs. I love that crab song from the first movie.
That's great.
It's
Shiny.
a great song. Shiny is a great song.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they got 2 more movies coming out this year, so that's going to be fun to watch. I'm curious about Mufasa. I'm not necessarily looking forward to it, but I'm genuinely curious about it because I want to see where the story goes. Like with Lion King, sometimes it felt unnecessary because it was a scene for scene remake, and other than showing off the technology, I wasn't sure what the movie was for. However, at least with Mufasa, it's telling a new story, and that I'm curious about. So we'll see how that plays out.
I mean, and look, I think Mufasa is a perfect example of content that Disney makes that may not be ideal, right? Because the question is, who needed to know this? Who was clamoring for the backstory of Scar and Mufasa? I don't think anybody was. So, also, from just the trailers, it is now looking like Scar was fucked. Can I just say, Scar had
Every reason to be pissed off.
every reason to be pissed off with Mufasa. And I'm just like, maybe I didn't need this. Maybe I liked the idea that a Jeremy Irons voiced Scar was just jealous of his brother. But now you're telling me that he had reasons because his fucking adopted brother fucked him over for the throne.
So the final question for this week comes from my wife, at Amanda F. Koo, who asks, how do you guys feel about watching TV shows and movies with the subtitles on? She's asking this question because we often have this discussion. I dislike watching TV shows and movies with the subtitles on, unless, of course, they're in a language I don't understand.
Sure, of course.
She says she can't hear things properly, so she must have the subtitles on.
Yep.
One exception to this rule is she was recently recovering after a pregnancy and a C-section, and she would have the baby in the room. And so to entertain herself, she would keep the volume of the TV show very low and watch it with the subtitles on. And in which case, that's okay. However,
Yeah.
I sincerely dislike watching shows with the subtitles on because I do not want to read television. And
Yeah.
you end up reading television. And I think a lot of people are now reading television and not watching television. And so therefore they miss a lot of the cool shit, a lot of the visual metaphors and cool stuff that directors and writers and filmmakers put on screen because they're so focused on reading the fucking show.
I'm like your wife. I can't hear for shit.
Fuck. Okay.
Look, I've done the online tests. I've actually gone to an actual medical person and he says my hearing's fine. I think you're wrong, good sir. But no, I have real trouble with the, music and the explosions and the dialogue things. But I will say this. I agree with you. And I don't watch new stuff with subtitles. Like, I will turn the subtitles off for Rings of Power. I leave the subtitles on for House of the Dragon because they tend to talk a lot. I will say, like, my wife can sometimes find it very annoying because I will have the subtitles off. And because I miss it, I will go back, turn the subtitles on so I can read what they're saying, and then turn it off and then keep going.
There are a couple of consequences from this. And it's a real thing. Vast amounts of audiences have started watching stuff with the subtitles on. And so one of the consequences is that sound designers are very upset because when people watch things with the subtitles on, they tend to lower the volume of the actual show.
Sure.
That happens as well. So all of the good work that sound designers and musicians do can get lost because a lot of that plays into your experience of the show. Now, the other consequence is that a lot of filmmakers realize that they can't do anything within those 2 inches of the show. You can't put anything there anymore because people are not going to be seeing it. A lot of it is going to be obscured by the subtitles. And so it actually cuts down the amount of screen real estate that filmmakers get to use. And I think that's actually happening in newer and newer productions because people are wising up to the fact that you don't have to be a foreign audience. Even if you are an English-speaking audience watching an English language show, you will turn on the subtitles.
Can I just say, I don't have this problem when I rewatch Casablanca.
Right.
I don't have this problem when I rewatch The Wizard of Oz. Yes, I empathize with sound designers. I'm so sorry. but at the same time, this is a dialogue driven bit. Maybe boost the dialogue. There's this thing about the audio range, right? It's because if your explosion's at a 10, your dialogue needs to be at a 4 so that when the explosion happens, there's a scale to it. There's a difference in volume so that the explosion feels stronger and realer. But the problem is when your dialogue is at a 4, I can't hear what they're saying. I'm not saying there has to be a better way, but that needs to be looked at. That explosion to dialogue volume range needs to be looked at.
There's a lot of other factors as well that play into what you're experiencing, because it also has a lot to do with streaming compression and the way streamers choose to compress their audio when they're delivering the product to you, because you may have a 2 megabit connection, I may have an 800-bit connection, and that's going to affect the product that we see.
Not only that, but am I watching it on an iPad? Am I watching it on a 5.1 surround sound system? Am I just watching it off my HomePod, which is fucking fantastic, by the way?
All of these things play a factor into how you receive that dialogue and that explosion. And I guess with the variety of products on the market, it becomes increasingly difficult to manufacture the perfect sound environment. But yeah, I still dislike it though. I don't know if it's because our generation is also predisposed to be reading a lot more. And so it's very difficult for me to not look down at the subtitles.
Yeah, no, I agree, which is why I have to make a conscious effort to not put it on for things that I love or things that are new or things that I want to truly experience.
Which is why, even with a lot of foreign shows, I find that sometimes I have to watch them twice, because you're reading the subtitles and you're missing some of the stuff that's going on screen. Also, I am occasionally tempted to use the dub, because then I can actually pay attention to the visuals.
I just hate the dub because then the audio and the mouth lips don't match up, and that I find that even more annoying.
The dubs work a lot better for animation and anime. That I can look past, but you're right. When I'm watching a Korean show or a Japanese show, cannot lah.
You know what I do? I will read the subtitles really quickly and then look up so I can see their facial expression during the delivery. That's what I do with like Pachinko, with all the Japanese stuff we watch. It's like as soon as the text shows up, I read it really quickly so I know what's going to happen. And then I look at their face and I go, oh, pained delivery of line dialogue. Yeah.
Maybe we just need speech bubbles popping up next to their face lah.
You shut up. Don't put it out into the world. You shut up.
All right. What are your thoughts on subtitles? Chime in, sound off. Do you watch shows 100% with subtitles on, or do you hate them like I do? Let us know. Keep those questions coming in as well. You know how to reach out. Goggler MY, all of our social media feeds. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my or send us a WhatsApp on the Goggler hotline, 012-524-5208. Thank you so much for listening. This is Ask Us Anything on the Goggler Podcast.